My life story is the story of an immigrant boy who came to the United States when he was 4. I came with my parents. My mom was pregnant at the time and came to the United States to seek prenatal care. We had been living in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic until my mom was informed that due to complications arising from her pregnancy, she might have to abort the child. And she elected to pursue prenatal care in the United States as a way of avoiding that, if she could. So we came to the United States initially for a short stay, and then my mom successfully gave birth to my younger brother, and then she experienced more medical complications and was hospitalized. At which point, my parents decided to stick around for a little longer until she recovered. Meanwhile, I'd been enrolled in kindergarten, and I really took a liking to kindergarten in the States. I seemed to enjoy school. And once my mom had fully mended, my parents came to the conclusion that it might be worthwhile to stay in the States for my education, for my brother's education. This decision proved to be problematic for a number of reasons. The first is that my parents had a really hard time getting a job. And this was tied to the second problem, which was that they had a really hard time legalizing their status. We'd come over on temporary tourist visas. Those expired. My dad was fleeced by a man he approached who claimed to be able to resolve his legal predicament. And so we were left undocumented. My dad tried to make a go of it, but my dad is considerably older than my mom. And after having some health issues of his own, he decided to return to the Dominican Republic when I was 7. My mom, though, being very stubborn, decided that she would stick it out. And we were eventually evicted from our apartment in Queens, where we were living at the time. So there are a couple, I tend to phrase my own account of how I became interested in the Romans and in classics as one of these overdetermined phenomena, which I talk to my students about all the time. This idea that there's no one sort of moment, it's really a concatenation of moments that contribute to the sense of self-fashioning. And in my case, the orientation towards the Roman world had a number of distinct turning points. So the first was an experience I talk a fair bit about in the memoir that I'm working on, which is when I was a kid, I lived for about a year and a half in 2 shelters in New York City. And I was very bored. But I was fortunate in that our shelter had a library. And so there happened to be a book on one of the shelves that featured accounts of how people lived in ancient Greece and Rome. And this is one of my first entry points into the study of the ancient world, into making sense of what it in fact meant to be someone living in ancient Greece and Rome, how we might even begin to think about this. And at the age of 8, I was captivated by that. While I was in the shelter system, I had the stroke of good fortune to make as a friend a man who taught in the LEAP program for arts for disadvantaged and underprivileged youth. And he was very enthusiastic about the possibility of securing me a position at one of Manhattan's private schools. And the memoir develops an account of what it was like to transition from these previous environments, from a shelter environment, from an apartment in central Harlem in which we were placed after exiting the shelter system, to this rarefied Upper West Side school environment. Especially in the last few years, I've become very interested in questions of mobility. This is not terribly surprising given that I am an immigrant and I have been subject to the vicissitudes of mobility. But what the study of classics enables, I think, in this connection, is a more granular appreciation of some of the determinants and constants behind human mobility. Already many of our ancient texts are swimming with these questions about how people move and why they move, how states coordinate movement, and crucially, how borders are policed. And this is a subject that has become especially interesting to me. So in one sense, there's a continuity between the kinds of issues that emerge in ancient settings and the kinds of issues that are debated about in contemporary context. But I'm also interested in some of the ethical questions involving mobility. And those ethical questions in turn bear on issues of how we treat strangers and how we treat foreigners. Already the concept of how one should treat foreigners is addressed in Homer. and in subsequent Greek literature and in Roman literature. So the issues that are foregrounded there about the ethics of responsible treatment of foreigners, what one can and cannot, what one should and should not do with foreigners, is something that has remained very alive and very meaningful and very productive for me.